Rick Harrison built a car empire worth millions. Over 30 classic vehicles filling his garages, his prized 1940 Chevy Deluxe sitting alongside Ferraris and NASCAR tributes, but then the bills started piling up. $65,000 monthly alimony payments. His own mother suing him for $500,000. Legal fees crushing his cash flow, and in 2025, something changed. Rick started making strange decisions about his beloved collection, passing on a $100,000 Ferrari and lowballing on cars he once would have bought instantly. What was really happening behind the Pawn Star's fortune? Rick Harrison was just 8 when his world broke apart. It started in 1973, lying in bed at the family's home in San Diego, when his head suddenly buzzed like tangled power lines, his body locked up, his tongue tore like hamburger meat. When it was over, he couldn't walk. Doctors called it focal onset aware seizures, but to Rick, it just meant pain. It happened every month for the next 10 years. The seizures damaged his muscles so badly he sometimes couldn't get out of bed for weeks. Ice packs wrapped around his legs, sometimes missing more than 200 days of school in a single year. He spent his childhood trapped between hospital visits and silent rooms, listening to the buzz in his skull and waiting for the next one to hit. While other kids played baseball, Rick read books. His mom brought him the Great Brain series from the library, and he fell in love with a boy named Tom, who pulled clever money-making schemes in small-town Utah. Rick devoured all 8 books in less than 2 weeks. He wanted to be Tom, he wanted to win. Then came history books. By age 12, Rick was reading about 18th century naval warfare, ancient coins, and obscure battles most adults had never heard of. Alone in his room, sweating from seizures, he unknowingly trained his brain for the job he'd become famous for decades later. He could spot small details others missed. He remembered everything, but life outside was cruel. At Taft Middle School, the bullying never stopped. Kids mocked him for twitching, looking pale, missing class. He couldn't play sports or run. He lived in fear of seizing in front of everyone. So he kept his head down and studied human behavior. Every insult taught him how people think. Every lonely lunch trained him to read faces and see weaknesses. What others called rejection, Rick called survival training. Then everything collapsed. In 1981, when Rick was 16, his family lost everything. His mom's real estate business was wiped out by the recession as mortgage interest rates hit 18%. His father had just left the Navy after 20 years. They lost $1 million. Only $5,000 remained. They packed up and moved to Las Vegas for a total reset. Rick had already dropped out of 10th grade. He was making $2,000 a week selling fake Gucci bags in the San Diego garment district, buying them for $30 and selling for $300. When competitors undercut him, he switched to fake jeans. His underground empire lasted nearly 2 years until the market dried up. In 1982, his girlfriend Kim got pregnant, but she had a miscarriage. They still married, and months later, she was pregnant again. Their son Corey was born in 1983, when Rick was 18. Adam came 2 years later. Money was tight. Kim left in 1985, dropping the kids off and never returning. Rick, now 20, was a single father with 2 toddlers, pawning his comic collection just to survive. He sold bootleg VHS tapes, flipped cars, even used a winch truck to steal a car from a dealership service bay and got arrested for selling fake goods. His hustles sharpened his instincts. In hospital waiting rooms, he started buying antique coins at age 12. The weight and patina made sense to him. He studied minting methods and fakes. It became an obsession. Losing his sister Sherry when he was a toddler created a permanent shadow. His parents carried that grief quietly, and Rick learned early that life could vanish without warning. By April 1981, the family opened a tiny 300-square-foot coin shop on Las Vegas Boulevard. Rick was bussing tables for $3.35 an hour while repossessing cars at night in dangerous neighborhoods. He dropped out of 10th grade for good and pushed deeper into hustles. He wanted a pawn license, but Las Vegas only issued one per 50,000 people. For 2 years, he called the city statistician weekly until the population hit 250,000 in 1989. After courtroom battles costing $15,000, Rick and his father won. They opened America's first 24-hour pawn shop, gold and silver pawn. In the 80s, the mafia still had influence, and Rick dealt with stolen goods, mob-connected customers, and violent confrontations. He kept loaded guns behind the counter. In 1986, he bought a rare slot machine, prototype, for $50,000 and sold it for $85,000, saving the shop. At home, his personal life was messy. He married Tracy after a blind date, blended families, sold guns without a license, and caught ATF attention. By 2005, they were lending $3 million a year and making $700,000 interest. Rick became known for spotting rare artifacts like an 1836 artillery sword he bought for $15,000 and sold for $75,000. But his father still owned 51%, and they clashed often. In the dot-com crash, Rick pivoted to sports memorabilia and survived. In 2013, he married Deanna. They divorced in 2020 with he paid $25,000 per month in family support before stopping due to financial pressure. On July 19, 2009, Pawn Stars aired and changed everything. The shop went from 50 customers a day, 2000s. Rick became famous worldwide. By 2016, he earned $15,000 per episode. Later, up to $100,000. The show featured insane items. O.J. Simpson's Bronco for $1.3 million. Stolen coin collections, and NASA equipment. Pawn Stars aired in 100-plus countries and turned Rick into a $9 million brand. But family cracks appeared. In 2021, Rick's mother Joanne sued him for allegedly tricking her while she was in a coma into giving up her 51% ownership, claiming missing cash and silver. She got a restraining order against him. Rick's relationship with Corey strained, too. His book, License to Pawn, revealed more history deals and treasures he'd never sell. In 2015, the IRS audited him over $500,000 in unreported silver. Filming nearly stopped. In 2018, he bought a NASA rocket engine for $100,000 and sold it for over $1 million. But family troubles grew. The old man died in 2018 from Parkinson's. His will intentionally excluded his youngest son, Christopher. Joanne later claimed hidden assets, unpaid monthly support, and financial manipulation. Rick faced 3 divorces, over $10 million lost to alimony, and $65,000 monthly payments. His latest divorce in 2021 included political disagreements about COVID vaccines. In 2016, Chumley's house was raided and drugs, weapons, and the notorious Chum Chum Room were found, damaging the show's image. In 2024, Rick's oldest son Adam died at 39 from fentanyl and meth toxicity. Rick spoke publicly about addiction and the fentanyl crisis. Rick himself had battled seizures as a child and now works with the Epilepsy Foundation and In March 2025, he proposed to nurse Angie Pelaskin in Chile. Fake rumors in 2025 claimed Rick was sentenced to life in prison, but it was debunked. He still suffers chronic pain from years of standing and filming. The pandemic hurt business. Lawsuits piled up. Yet as of 2025, Rick is worth about $12 million. He earns roughly $100,000 per episode. The pawn shop earns $700,000 yearly in loan interest, and his podcast Pawn After Dark gains traction. His car collection remains intact despite rumors, and passing on expensive cars isn't desperation IC strategy. His lawyers warned him, "Rick, you're going to lose everything." The alimony payments didn't stop, the classic car maintenance didn't stop, and the IRS letters kept coming. Red stamps, deadlines, warnings. By 2019, Rick was juggling 3 mortgages and quietly selling off cars he once swore he'd keep forever. The 1940 Chevy Deluxe, gone. The NASCAR tribute car, auctioned at a loss, but the final blow came from someone he never expected: his own family. A bitter legal dispute erupted over his mother's estate. Suddenly, headlines were everywhere. Pawn Stars empire in chaos. Rick Harrison sued by his own mother. What the cameras didn't show was the moment Rick broke down. Backstage during filming, he stared at the floor and whispered, "I built this from nothing. And now, it's all falling apart." Production was halted for hours. Crew members offered him water. Chumlee. Tried to crack jokes to lighten the mood. But Rick wasn't listening. His phones kept buzzing. Lawyers, banks, reporters. For the first time in his life, the man who negotiated million-dollar deals couldn't negotiate his way out of his own problems. And then, in the middle of the chaos, came the call he feared most. "Rick, you're out of time." The empire he spent 30 years building was days away from collapsing. But what happened next was something no one expected. Not the fans, not the media, not even Rick himself. Because the man who once stood behind the counter was about to lose everything in front of the world. The call came at 6:12 a.m. Rick Harrison had just stepped out of the shower, towel around his neck, trying to convince himself that today would be different. But when he saw the caller ID, every ounce of hope evaporated. "Bank of Nevada, URGNT, he answered, bracing himself. "Mr. Harrison," the voice said, calm but cold. "This is our final courtesy call before proceedings begin." Rick closed his eyes. "What proceedings?" "Repossession, asset liquidation, facility review. We've sent multiple notices, I know," Rick muttered. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He was tired. For 30 years, he had run on pure momentum. Wake up, grind, negotiate, build, repeat. But momentum only works when the machine is still running. And right now, for the first time in his life, the engine had stalled. The financial FREFLL, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, wasn't just a TV location. It was a real business, with real overhead. Most fans didn't understand that. The show brought fame, but fame didn't pay property taxes. Fame didn't repair HVAC units. Fame didn't cover the 6-figure insurance policies required for displaying rare artifacts and With the lawsuits, legal fees, and crushing alimony payments, Rick was bleeding money faster than the shop could generate it. He tried to cut costs quietly. He reduced staff hours. He postponed a remodel he'd promised for 3 years. He sold a portion of his memorabilia collection under the radar, but none of it made a dent. By the summer of that year, the pawn shop was operating at a loss for the first time in its history. Fans still lined up outside for photos, expecting the confident businessman they'd seen on TV, the guy who always knew the value of everything and the price of everyone. But behind the scenes, Rick was calculating costs down to the penny, just to keep the doors open for 1 more week. Some mornings he'd stand on the pawn shop rooftop before the crew arrived. Staring at the Las Vegas Strip in the distance, he would whisper to himself, how did it come to this? The breaking Pau-on-Titha legal fight with his mother was the spark, but the explosion came from all angles. Reporters camped outside his home. Tabloids published exaggerated headlines. Fans speculated online that he was hiding money. And his own family members stopped answering his calls. Only Corey stayed by his side, but even their relationship strained under the stress. Corey wanted to modernize the business, bring in new investors, expand online operations. Rick resisted. We built this place with our hands, Rick snapped during one argument. You don't just sell the soul of the business to tech guys with no clue about history. Corey clenched his jaw. Dad, I'm trying to keep us alive. Rick turned away. We're not dead yet. But deep down, he knew they were close. The pawn shop's bank accounts were late on payments. The car collection was nearly gone. And the home he had raised his kids in his last sanctuary was more to the breaking point. The LETTR1 evening. After the pawn shop closed, Rick sifted through a pile of unopened mail. He was too drained to read most of it. More bills, more warnings, more demands. Then he saw a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with shaky handwriting. I know you're going through hell, but remember who you were before the show. You were a fighter long before. You were famous. Don't let this beat you. There was no signature, no clue who sent it, but he read the letter 5 times, and something inside him shifted. For months, he'd been operating from fear. Fear of losing the business, fear of disappointing fans, fear of failing his family. But those fears had turned him into a shadow of the man who once hustled in cheap Vegas pawn stores at 19 years old. The letter reminded him of the old version of himself, the version who took risks, not orders. He folded the note, put it in his pocket, and walked back into the shop. Tomorrow, everything had to change. The DECISCO in the next morning. Rick called an emergency meeting. Corey Chumley, a few key managers, and 2 lawyers sat around the old wooden conference table. No cameras, no producers, just real people, real problems. Rick cleared his throat. We're not doing the show today. Everyone looked at each other. Corey frowned. Dad, what do you mean? Rick leaned forward, hands clasped. I mean we're hitting pause. If we keep pretending everything's fine, the business will collapse while we're busy filming scenes. Chumley blinked slowly. So, no funny skits today. Rick cracked a faint smile. Not today. The lawyers exchanged glances. Rick, you understand the network won't like that. I don't care what they like. They don't own me. His voice was steady, not angry, determined. For years we let the show dictate everything. Now we're going back to being a business again. Corey nodded slowly. Okay, what's the plan? Rick took a deep breath. We rebuild, strip it down, reset the books, and start over. He laid out what he wanted. Renegotiate bank terms, rebrand online sales, turn the upstairs storage into a revenue-generating auction space. Sell off non-essential assets. Bring in experts to analyze every expense. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but the room felt different, alive again. Corey sat back, staring at his father with a mixture of shock and pride. You really think we can save this? He asked. Rick nodded. I've saved worse. A slow grin spread across Chumley's face. We're back, baby, for the first time in months. Rick felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The FIGHTBA next 6 months were brutal. Meetings, negotiations, deals, long nights. Rick personally trained staff on new customer strategies. Corey overhauled the digital systems. Chumley filmed behind-the-scenes content for fans, reminding them the shop was still alive. Rick sold the final 2 luxury vehicles in his collection. It hurt, but he told himself, cars can be replaced. This place can't. They cut costs everywhere they could, but without sacrificing customer experience. Slowly, painfully, numbers began to shift. The pawn shop started generating profit again. Small at first, but steady. The bank agreed to a modified plan. The lawsuits settled. Quietly, the negative press vanished as quickly as it appeared. And one day, a network executive called Rick personally. We heard you've been rebuilding, she said. How would you feel about a new season? Rick smirked. We'll do it, he said, but on our terms this time. The reach you are and win. The cameras rolled again. Rick wasn't the same man who broke down backstage months earlier. He was leaner, softer spoken, more focused. In the premiere episode, He stood in the center of the pawn shop, looking directly into the camera. "This place almost disappeared," he said. "Life hit me harder than any negotiation I've ever made. But if there's one thing I've learned, or never too old to start over." Fans flooded the internet with support. Tourists lined up around the block again. Business surged. Rick never found out who sent him the anonymous letter. He never needed to, because the truth was simple. He had saved himself, the man who refused to break in the end. Rick Harrison didn't lose everything. He didn't let the lawsuits define him. He didn't let the collapse destroy him. Instead, he did what he'd always done, the thing that made him who he was. He stood up, he faced the chaos, and he rebuilt from the ashes. Not as a TV star, not as a businessman, but as a survivor. The empire he built almost crumbled, but the man behind it never did.